Welcome back. South Africa's nuclear regulator says it has received 2 nuclear installation site license applications from power utility Eskom. The national nuclear regulator says the applications are for the building of new reactors along the east coast and the west coast of the country. South Africa currently operates the continent's only nuclear power station and wants to install an additional 9,600 megawatts of nuclear power by 2030. Now, the intention to build a fleet of 6 nuclear power stations has raised concerns. Many argue it would be unaffordable for a country struggling with low growth and facing a ratings downgrade to junk status. Well, Tim Yeo is the chairman of the new Nuclear Watch Europe and a former UK parliamentarian. He joins me now to take a closer look at the viability of the nuclear initiative. Tim, thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Glad to be here.
All right, so perhaps let's start with a global sense of where we are with nuclear. I see the annual World Nuclear Industry Status Report says nuclear's share of world energy has been declining over the past 20 years. And I'd like to know, with some countries rejecting it, how should that inform our intention and initiative?
Well, I think the 2 key things that nuclear can do, one is it's reliable, it provides baseload power, there's plenty of uranium, particularly, of course, here in South Africa, and the diversity of fuel suppliers. Secondly, and this is much more important now than it was 20 years ago, it's low carbon. And South Africa played a very distinguished role in raising, I think, global awareness of the need to cut carbon emissions to deal with climate change. So it ticks those 2 boxes. The key test is the one you just mentioned, affordability, because, fossil fuel prices have been going down, the cost of some renewables has fallen a long way, particularly solar. But we believe that nuclear is actually an affordable alternative. It's right there in the picture, particularly if a country looking at a new investment chooses a tried and tested technology. I think what's driven the cost of nuclear up in places like the UK is we've gone for first of a kind. If you go for nth of a kind, an established technology from a tried and tested producer, you'll get a much cheaper deal.
Yeah, but I was just wondering why you had this decline of nuclear share in the world share of energy. I mean, what's going on there? And also, just to add to that, 3/4 of the units being built across the world, according to the report, are delayed. 5 have been under construction for 30 years. It seems that nuclear power companies are in financial trouble.
Well, let's deal with those 2 points separately. I think the share of nuclear has gone down because in the developing world, which has expanded very rapidly during that period, there's a lot of cheap coal available. Now, that's going to get much harder because of the environmental concerns about coal. Secondly, there's a glut of gas in many parts of the world, and gas also has become cheaper. So people have been using gas a lot. And thirdly, we've seen renewables come in for the first time, really, in the last 5 years, as a significant generator of electricity. So those are the background factors. That's why nuclear has not expanded during that period. But what's happening now is you've got parts of the world which are developing cheaper nuclear technologies, and these include some of the bidders for the possible contracts here. Korea building very successfully both at home and in the Emirates. China rolling out on big scale as they do everything else on a big scale. So nuclear power stations become like a commodity there. And in Russia as well, they've got a very successful technology being built in Finland. Now, I think as we see cheaper nuclear coming available, and as we see the economic benefits to the countries which develop new nuclear, then I think we'll see nuclear's share rise again. That's certainly what's projected by the International Energy Agency.
Yeah. Coming back to the whole issue of affordability, and one question is, well, if there are financial cutbacks, surely that might compromise safety, and need I not bring up what happened in Japan?
Well, that was a tsunami rather than a nuclear accident in Fukushima. I think safety is obviously the first and key consideration, but South Africa's had successful experience with its own nuclear power station. It's got a good regulator here, so people here needn't worry about the safety issues. Nuclear is a very safe technology in the countries that have used it. Coming back to the question of price, though, we at New Nuclear Watch Europe have just commissioned a study, it was published yesterday, which shows that over the lifetime of a nuclear plant, it is actually cost competitive with coal. It also delivers cuts in carbon emissions more cheaply than other technologies. And thirdly, if a country negotiates right and gets a decent chunk of the supply chain work here in South Africa, as for example, South Africa's developed an enormously successful car industry in the last 20 years. The same thing could happen with the nuclear industry. Then you actually boost GDP by going down the nuclear route.
Yeah. Just final question. I want to look at Germany and just look at their almost sort of total rejection of nuclear and some of its initiatives there. What's different between a country like Germany and us? Why should our posture be different?
I think if you asked a lot of German consumers, they'd say don't follow the German energy policy. Prices are very high there. And the environmental consequences of saying no to nuclear is they're burning more lignite, which is one of the most polluting forms of coal. Yep. They've invested heavily in very expensive renewable technology. So I think talk to the business consumers and domestic consumers, they'd say we don't think ours is the best model to follow.
All right, and then finally, you look at Europe. We spoke about Europe very quickly. 80% of the countries, or rather, they've decided to generate 80% of their power from renewables come 2050. Why do you think we should not go that route to South Africa?
Well, I've looked at your IRP, the projection of where your energy is going to come from. Yep. That's only saying 20% from nuclear by 2030. So there's still going to be a big chunk here, obviously from coal and from renewables. So I think 20% roughly is what the UK does as well, as it happens. I think there's a balance, there's an energy mix which we need, and nuclear should be part of it. Of course renewables are part of it as well. We're not saying it's an either or, they actually complement each other.
Tim Yeo from the New Nuclear Watch Europe, thanks very much indeed for coming in.
You're welcome.